Hello everyone. AILET 2023 was conducted today. So how was the paper? I know the pattern was a bit different and that came as an element of surprise to most of you. Because earlier they used to ask English questions followed by logical reasoning questions, then general knowledge and current affairs question. This time what they have done is they have merged the English and logical reasoning section. So there were two parts to the paper, part 1 and part 2. And part 1 of the paper was divided into section A and section B. Section A had questions from English, section B were questions from logical reasoning. And they used the same passage for testing questions on English as well as logical reasoning. So there was a passage, then 5 questions from English for the same passage, then 7 questions of logical reasoning from the same passage. So the passage this time was common for English as well as logical reasoning. This was a new thing for AILET paper. It has never happened before that they are using the same passage for English as well as logical reasoning. Earlier we used to have exclusive passages, exclusive questions. So this came as an element of surprise for most of us. And but however, if your concepts are clear, if you knew the basics of the kind of questions that are asked in English, the kind of questions that were asked in logical reasoning, like if your concepts are clear, you would have easily sailed through it. I accept that the paper was a bit on the difficult side. I won't say it was an easy paper. The difficulty level would be considered as moderate to difficult because the balancing factor here was the general knowledge and current affairs section. The questions in general knowledge and current affairs sections were very easy. So let us analyze AILET 2023 and see what the paper was about and what is the expected cutoff and the things about it. So starting with, just one second. Difficulty level, as I already mentioned, moderate to hard. Hard because the questions from logical reasoning were not something that you would have, the topics that they choose were a bit technical. The topics were not something that a layman could easily understand. You required some exposure to those kind of passages. So have you been reading all the newspapers or the editorials, the things that we are have been sharing, then you would have understood it. You would have got the hang of it. And starting the moment you started the paper, the surprise element of the pattern change, because the moment you flipped the question paper, when you received the question paper and you opened it, there was part 1 section A, section B. That was an element of surprise. What is that? Because question 1 to 5 is from English and the remaining 7 questions are from logical. So it was not in a sequence. It's not that there are 50 questions from English, 70 from logic, and 50 from general knowledge. It is there, but it was overlapping. It was merged. English and logical section was merged together. So if you could cope up with that element of surprise, that okay, this is the new pattern, and I have to focus like this only. First, solve the English questions, then come to the logical questions from the same passage. Now, passages were of course long because so many questions have to be carved out. So many questions from English as well as logical has to be carved out, and that is why the passages were also such that had the element of logical reasoning as well as English. Sorry. So the selection of passage was also a bit on the technical side. The passages had topics that talked about complex patterns, arrangements, and things that, so that easily some logical reasoning questions can be carved out from the passage apart from the English section. They were not plain English passages that anyone can read and only be tested on English language, because logic has to be tested from that passage only. So that was an element of surprise. I'm pretty sure that time institutes students would have easily sailed through it with the kind of practices we have had regarding vocabulary, regarding the kind of questions were not very difficult, because the questions were like previous years only. You had to guess the title for the passage. You had to complete the sentences. You have to choose the appropriate words, replace the words. So the kind of questions we have already practiced. So that was something that was different this time in AILET. As I already mentioned, part 1 was divided into 2 sections, section A and section B. This was a new thing. And part 2 was general knowledge and current affairs. So general knowledge and current affairs had 30 questions and it was very easy. quite frankly, the kind of questions, at least in the time student, the material that we provide, most of the questions could easily be directly found there, be it current affairs, be it general knowledge. The first section, the first part that was there, had total 10 passages. There were total 10 passages in part 1. And part 1, that consisted of English language as well as logical reasoning questions, because the passages were common for both the topics. Each passage had 5 questions from English, 7 questions from logic. So there was a passage, 5 questions from English from the same passage, 7 questions from logical reasoning from the same passage. So there were 10 passages. The first passage was regarding primogeniture. So it talked about how the succession happens, who comes to the throne. So it talked about primogeniture. It talked about so many other modes of inheritance, how the person inherits, who becomes in charge. So that was explained, that there were easy questions from English in this section. Second passage was regarding Grand Prix. It talked about that how the uh, Formula One cars, they stay grounded, how they with that speed. So some technical aerodynamics was discussed, and there were questions regarding that. Passage 3 was interesting because in this paper, this is a paper for law entrance examination, but it was very rare to find a legal question throughout the paper. Passage 3, however, was from jurisprudence. Now, let me tell you that normally we do not teach jurisprudence to law aspirants. We usually teach torts, contract, constitution, miscellaneous areas of law like family law, intellectual property law. Jurisprudence is a bit technical, a bit higher standard legal area that usually we study detail in or LLM, even after LLB. But jural correlatives, jural opposites, which is a very a topic in jurisprudence that was tested in passage 3, and this passage 3 was completely dedicated to legal, but even in legal, a very higher form of legal. So not the traditional legal that usually we expect in law entrance examinations. So jural correlatives, jural opposites, what are rights, what are privileges, duty, no duty, all those things were discussed in passage 3. Passage 4 was about compass as a navigation tool. So of course it had questions from English language, and logical reasoning questions were for the directions. So some direction questions were from passage 4. Passage 5 was a bit predictable because fishing is a very popular topic, very common topic that we keep coming across in various print media as well as social media. So all the articles, all the editorials, you must have come across at least two topics: fishing and this crypto mining. These were predictable topics. Crypto mining you must have come across at several places while surfing, while reading the articles. So fishing was discussed in detail. What is phishing, how the scam happens. So again, the questions from English as well as logical were there for the phishing. Then sixth passage was regarding Great Pacific Garbage Patch, that talked about in detail about various aspects of Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Passage 7 talked about that how Aristotle was the first one who gave syllogism. So see, do you see what they're doing? They're choosing passages from which the specific topics of logical reasoning could be carved out. Like if direction questions have to be given, the whole passage is about compass as a navigation tool, and an article about compass so that they can cover out English questions as well as logical reasoning questions. If syllogism has to be tested, they gave a whole article about how syllogism started and the people who contributed to the study of syllogism. So it's a passage about syllogism so that Aristotle and these people can be discussed, and in questions from English can be asked from that, and also the question from the logical reasoning. Then there was a question about Queen Elizabeth, her succession. uh, then crypto mining is already mentioned. And then there was a question about who are your first cousins, who are your second cousins, who are your third cousins. And it was a very interactive passage, and the kind of questions like what is the tone of the passage? How is the author interacting with the audience, with the readers? And there were questions, and of course, it's a family tree. They are discussing. The author is telling you who are first cousin, who are second cousin, who are third cousin. Then there are questions regarding blood relations. So very cleverly, very intelligently, the passages have been selected this time, because the passages had to test both the aspects of your preparation, English as well as logical reasoning, from the same passage. So all the topics of logical reasoning were carved out from those passages that has the potential of directions, of blood relations, of syllogisms, of even this the passage that they choose for jurisprudence, that is jural correlatives and jural opposites, had so much potential of carving out so many questions from logical reasoning. So this was your part one. That was difficult. I won't say it was easy. The passages were not something that you would have easily just scanned through, and it was English plain language. It was technical. It required some amount of uh, concentration, and the speed was very important because passages were long, passages were not short. So had you managed your time, had you managed your accuracy, you would have got decent experience with part one of the paper, which was divided into section A and section B. This GK and current affairs was a sigh of relief because the questions were very easy. The questions, very very predictable questions, like who won the Nobel Peace Prize. Now this is something that every law aspirant who is preparing for any competitive examination will definitely be well versed with, that who won the Nobel Prize, who won the Oscars, who won various prestigious prizes that are of international repute. So Nobel Peace Prize winner, where is Human Rights Day? Every law aspirant should know that 10th December is the Human Rights Day. Then when it's Voters Day, 25th January. These are some questions that every law aspirant, these were very easy questions. And there were only 30 questions in general knowledge sections. Out of it, 12 questions were from static GK and 18 questions were from current affairs. Now, as you must have seen that there were no legal questions from in the logical reasoning section except that jurisprudence ones, but at least 3 questions from law were asked in the general knowledge section. Like there was a question regarding fundamental duties, that which of the following is not a feature of fundamental duty. Very easy question, very easy. Any law student would have easily done it. Law aspirant would have easily done it. Then there were questions regarding how many amendments we have had in the Constitution of India. Very straightforward, easy questions. And also questions like who is the current chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, who is the current who is the newly appointed election commissioner. So these are the questions that you won't say difficult at all. Any serious candidate who has been preparing would have had the exposure to such questions, would have easily done these questions. There were several questions from sports, including badminton, chess, and the World Heritage Sites in India. So, general knowledge and current affairs was a relief in the otherwise difficult paper. So, overall, balancing the paper, that easy general knowledge and surprising and a bit difficult, lengthy English logical reasoning section, the overall paper was quite balanced out. So, we can say it was moderate to hard. We cannot say it was completely difficult. General knowledge was quite easy. We cannot say it was easy because logical and English were not very easy. So moderate to difficult, that is the difficulty level we will put in. So I'm assuming that you all put your best efforts, and let's wait for the result. The official answer key will be out very soon. And the expected cutoff here would be, I mean, of course, since the paper difficulty level of the paper was a bit on the higher side, the cutoff will be on the lower side. So if you are scoring, say, in 80s, 85 plus, then there is a chance that you can get into the National Law University of Delhi. And of course, you have AILET coming the next week on 18 December. This should serve as an example that be ready for surprises, uh, be well versed with at least easy questions. Do not miss out marks on the questions that everybody knows. Like here in the general knowledge sections, there were questions that every serious candidate should know. Do not lose marks there. At least refresh, revise all your concepts for CLAT at least, and uh, always speed and accuracy, that is the key that you have to keep in mind. So that's all for this analysis. Thank you so much. Check out your answer key. You have your OMR sheets. You can check your own performance. Very soon it will be clear. And if you're getting in 85 plus, there is a high chance that you will make it to NLU Delhi. All the best. Thank you so much.